Hello and welcome to the Wednesday week, the Sheffield Wednesday podcast. And this is, well, it's a little bit different. I'm James. There's no Lord Hillsborough here tonight. There's no Vic. There's no Eddie. There's no Rich. There is Dan Fudge. Hello.
Hello, I'm Dan Fudge.
It is just the two of us. And this is not, we're not just really unlucky, like the other guys have not just abandoned us. This was designed. This is how we wanted it to be tonight, for it just to be me and Fudge, a nice, romantic evening over Skype, just the two of us.
I feel like we need some piano in the background.
Yeah, we do, don't we? Yeah, we need a guy playing piano in the background. That'd fit. And kind of the reason that we decided to do this is because, particularly kind of in the last, third of the season, there were quite a few occasions where you and I, Fudge, had a difference of opinion. And at times, it was always healthy, but at times it got quite heated. And we had some quite strong disagreements, probably more so than any other kind of combination on the podcast. So, we were kind of talking about whether or not we should do this anyway. A couple of people on Twitter got involved saying that they'd really like us to do it. So we were going to do it anyway. We spoke to the rest of the guys from the podcast and said, look, we're going to do this thing, just the two of us. Do we do it under the umbrella of the Wednesday week, or do we create something different because it's just the two of us? And everyone said, no, do it as the Wednesday week. So, we've not been rude. We've not kicked them off for I think they're all on holiday anyway, to be fair, and they're probably quite happy to have a bit of time not talking about football. So that's kind of the background to it, and that is why we're here. Now, can I set my stall out really early here and get this, because we've billed this as the Showdown, and we'll probably end up not disagreeing about anything. But the first thing that I want to say is why? Why are we here? What purpose does this serve? I've been thinking about this today and thinking, you know what? I'm at peace with what happened last season. I've had all the anger that I needed to have. It's all out of my system. I'm at peace with the way last season finished. And I just don't know if I see the point kind of going over old stuff again. Is it necessary?
I think there's a lot of fans out there that are still genuinely angry about the way that the season finished. I think we made some tactical errors. I think we made some errors in signing, errors in judgment, errors all over the place, and some of them never seem to be addressed. And I think there's a lot of fans out there, especially on Twitter, that we see, that are genuinely annoyed. And then I think all this came to light. I mean, you and I discussed this straight after the Huddersfield versus Reading playoff final, where Huddersfield ended up going up to play Premier League. Now, fingers crossed they don't go up there and stick 10 men behind the ball. They try and do what Bournemouth did and play football. But if they keep Wagner, they might do that. If they don't keep Wagner, but that's another show. That's for somebody else. But I think there's a lot of times where a lot of the Wednesday faithful want to air their opinion, and they want to get it out there, and they want to discuss the big talking points of where we may or may not have gone wrong.
But is it does seem to have come to a head since Huddersfield won promotion. Is this just basic sour grapes on our part as Wednesday fans? That we all kind of said, well, Fulham were the favourites. If they go up, fair enough, they've been in good form. Well, Reading, been there before. None of us really entertained the idea of Huddersfield getting promoted. I think even on the day of the game, even as the game was kicking off, I think most of us thought this is in the bag for Reading. I can't see anything other than a Reading victory. Are we just literally throwing the dummy out here because Huddersfield have gone up and we haven't?
There's an element to that, of course, but I think as a collective, I think what some of the fans want to do is you and I, in the capacity we do on the Wednesday week, we need to make sense of where our failings are, where our positives are. We're still happy clappers at the end of the day, and where we stand as a squad, and where we believe, and the fans that we've had interaction with over the last few weeks that have sent us some stuff that we'll go through tonight. I think we need to make a sense of where we are as Sheffield Wednesday and what we need and what our process is going forward. And I think this is where the crux of the show needs to be, as opposed to just two Yorkshiremen whinging.
Yeah, fair point. I mean, we obviously we did do a podcast kind of the week after the Huddersfield game, which you weren't around for, if I remember correctly.
That's right.
I claimed victory for Team James by default, by the way, after that.
Yeah, I did hear.
But the point came up, and I think a couple of people tweeted me about this afterwards, actually, because I think they were surprised and, in some cases, disappointed that I said this, that looking at the season as a whole now, I don't think that we can view it as anything other than a failure, because our aim at the start of the season, the manager and the chairman will have sat down, they'll have a conversation. What's the target this season? Obviously, the target is promotion. It has to be. We made it to the playoff final the season before. The target has to be promotion. And I would imagine that they've said, ideally, it would be automatic, but if we need to go through the playoffs, then we'll go through the playoffs. And we didn't achieve it. And I just can't see how people who are saying, well, we finished 2 places above where we finished the season before. It doesn't matter. We finished further away from the Premier League than we did the season before, because we lost in the semi-finals. So I can't really see any way of seeing the season other than as a failure. Now, don't get me wrong, that's not me saying it was a terrible season. It's not me saying it was a disaster. I thought there were some really good points last season. I had some really good times watching Wednesday, particularly on the road, some really good away days. There were some really good days at Hillsborough as well. But overall, football is a results business, isn't it? And we've got to take stock of the fact that we finished 4th, we didn't get promoted. That's, we might as well finish 7th and be in Leeds, hadn't we?
Yeah, well, yeah. It's essentially, we may as well have finished mid-table. It didn't really make a difference because at the end of the day, we didn't achieve our target. So if you want to look back, I mean, where do you want to start? Do you want to start at the start of the season with recruitment, or do you want to start from playoff leg 1? And we can start from there and do it retrospectively, if you like.
Yeah, well, let's do that. Let's start with Huddersfield and work our way backwards, because I think that's probably fresh in most people's minds. And from the comments that we've had, I think it's probably the thing that most people feel quite aggrieved by. And this subject of the first leg, and we disagreed about this quite strongly. Yeah. On paper, I guess you would claim victory by the fact that we ultimately lost the tie, because I argued that the away performance at Huddersfield was a top-notch away performance. To go there and keep a clean sheet, that had to be the aim, and we achieved that. Now, your view was quite a bit different.
Yeah, it was that don't get me wrong. I think taking a draw to Hillsborough was, at the time you'd have thought, well, it was a great result. We'd have gone, we're in a commanding position. We're going to go to our ground and we're going to do it right. However, it was the manner of it. We at no point. I mean, the form that Huddersfield went into those playoffs, there was no way, shape, or being that they should have knocked us out of that competition. That everybody constantly, year in, year out, at this time of year, always harps on about the form team. The form team hitting the stride as they get to the playoffs. Huddersfield were the worst one. They were terrible. They got some god awful results against Cardiff. They drew against what was it? They got Cardiff. They lost against Birmingham. They had a narrow victory at Wolves. But when they got beat, they got absolutely spanked. They also lost to Fulham. They got spanked there. They didn't beat Derby. They lost. They just beat Preston. So they'd not won. I think they'd won 1 in 5 going into the playoffs. So this is a team that were licking their wounds somewhat, and they were a little bit vulnerable. And I thought playing the defensive game that we did in that first leg was a little bit offensive, and I think we gave them a little bit too much respect going into that game. And for me, look from the outside looking in, I think they were a team for the taking.
Yeah, in hindsight, I mean, I'd still argue that we did the right thing, that the priority was keeping a clean sheet, and that we, therefore, it should have been, the easy bit then should have been bringing them back to Hillsborough and doing the business on that, whatever it was, Wednesday night or whatever. And probably my annoyance, if you like, is more centred around that, because I think when you're away, there is that nervousness there, isn't there? There is that kind of like, you can try and hit them on the break. And I'm going to mention James Allen at this point, Manhattan Owl on Twitter, who sent us his thoughts about it, which actually I think are pretty good and probably opened my eyes to something that I'd maybe allowed myself to ignore a bit, which is that defensively we did play it right, and tactically we played it right. However, when there was the opportunity for us to break, we were very ineffective in doing it. We were very sluggish through midfield. It did look like there were a couple of players that weren't really fit that were playing in that game, and we never really looked like we were going to be able to hit them on the break, which is kind of, I suppose, a fairly significant part of that kind of tactic. It's fine to sit there and soak up the pressure, but you've got to be able to hit people quite quickly on the break, because you can't just go away and draw every game 0-0. At some point, you have to win some of those games. So it's not, it's a tactic that doesn't have longevity.
Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. But I think we confounded it even more by, after an hour, we then brought on Dave Jones and completely changed the way we're playing to even more defensively. I think it might have been Peter Beagrie who was on TV saying that Sheffield Wednesday start very slowly. This is early on in the season, by the way, not during the playoffs, because he was notable by his absence. But he said that Sheffield Wednesday start slow. We are a patient team. We have a slow build, and then we go for the jugular later on while we've still got our fitness, because we're a very fit team and we're a very clever team and X, Y, Z. But I thought the pivotal moment of how we were going to set our stall out, we went even further backwards when we brought Jones on, because that changed. That kind of put 3 centre midfielders in. We had two wingers and 4 at the back. It was like, yeah, you know what? We're just going to camp here. 0-0's all right for us, kids. We're fine here.
But this is going to lead us into a bit more of a general discussion, isn't it, about how we played over the course of the season, because we undoubtedly there was a change in style of play at a certain point last season, where I think we started the season trying to play kind of the same way that we had done in the season before, and at some point Carlos realised we are not going to get promoted, we are not going to win enough games playing like that anymore. We need to find a way of winning difficult games, of shutting teams down and not letting them hit them. If you think about the season before, and particularly at the start of this season, the number of goals that we conceded quite late in games was really bad. And I'm thinking the one that springs out to me is that injury time one at Birmingham, where we should have won that game. We were the better team by a mile, and somehow we lose it. And it felt like after that Carlos went away and thought, right, this is not going to work. We are not going to go up playing like this. We've got to do something different. We've got to try something different. And that's pretty much what he did. He rethought our style of play to make us difficult to break down. And if you look at the teams that have been promoted to the Premier League over the last few years, in the majority of cases, there are teams that have built their style of play around being difficult to break down, basically being pretty boring. Hull did it to us. Huddersfield, certainly our Flair team, they were pretty dull. They didn't even score a goal of their own throughout the entire playoff process.
No,
they didn't even win a game through the playoffs. But they did what they needed to do defensively and somehow rode it through. Reading, another example of a team that built their season around being difficult to break down, difficult to beat. The only other team really that was knocking around the top end of the table, who actually played with some degree of flair, was Fulham. And everyone thought, well, they'll walk it. Fulham Wednesday playoff final for definite. And both of us, we didn't get there. Is this indicative of the kind of the league the Championship has become now? If you want to get promoted out of the Championship, forget about playing with flair, because it isn't going to win you games. And I know you're going to argue that it's what we should do, but there's an argument to say next season we need to get even tougher. We need to shut teams down even more strongly and win games dirty all season long, because that's how you get out of the Championship.
But I don't think it's a blueprint for the bigger picture, if that makes sense. So it might be good for, let's say we get into the playoffs and we stick 5 at the back. People can't break us down. We have a corner and we nod one in, and that's us. We're going to Wembley with one. You know what I mean? There is no longevity in just trying your best to keep the ball out the net. There isn't. I believe Newcastle won the league, and at no point did they stick 10 men behind the ball. They played lovely, flat, fast-flowing football. Yeah, all right, yes, because they had the players in which they could do it. As did Brighton. They at no point stuck 10 men behind the ball and park the bus. They've played fast-flowing, lovely football. And, they've managed to get a tune out of a big stag like Knockout, for example. But then they've got the people at the back, like, who's the big lad with the beard? Is it Bruno? They've got the marriage right. They've got the balance correct. And yes, they've Brighton, on one hand, have got a few years of building a team that fit well with their ethos, and Newcastle have got £1 million pounds. Do you know what I mean? So, those are people with decent clientele on their roster. However, so have we. We've got, you'd argue 4 of the top 10 best strikers in the league. Well, if you were a bit, a bit biased, but do you know what I mean? I don't think we're using them correctly, and I don't think we've actually found what our best formation is. I would love to take a page out of Newcastle's book and take a page out of Brighton's book and play the football that they play, because it's exciting, it's attacking, and it absolutely strikes the fear of God into teams that have just tried to park the bus, like Reading, for example.
Okay. There's one thing in that I disagree with, and do you know what? I've got to be honest. I didn't actually watch very much of Newcastle last season. I've never been particularly fussed about Newcastle, but I like Brighton. I've always liked Brighton, and I wanted Brighton to go up. Whenever Brighton were on the TV, I would watch them, and they were on the TV a fair old bit. So I saw quite a bit of Brighton last season, and there were as many games where, for whatever reason, Brighton just didn't get into their flow, where it wasn't happening for them, and they were able to change very quickly to a style of play which was, we're not going to concede, and you know what, we're going to get a lucky goal. And they always seemed to do it. They got quite a lot of late winners last season, including against us, where they weren't great against us at their place. And they got that late winner. They've just got a way of being able to switch from one style to another. So they will go out and they'll have a go at teams. But if it's not happening for whatever reason, they're very good at winning games in quite an ugly fashion as well. Is it the fact that we just haven't got the blend right, or is it that our players aren't good enough to be able to switch from one system to another halfway through a game and pull it off?
That's an excellent point, because I think it's a bit of both. I think we are... some of the messages I've had were, Stokey on Twitter, he said that we're 6 or 7 away from having a decent squad that we need. He said that we need somebody in midfield, somebody like, ironically, Aaron Moy in midfield, who I thought was a standout player of the playoffs myself. I thought he was incredible. We do need one of those players, and you do need Christ, we talk about it like we talk about Jose Semedo, like an enforcer in the middle of the park. But Aaron Moy is a ball-playing enforcer, and that's where the difference is. He's a box-to-box midfielder, like an old-school Paul Gascoigne or Gerrard or Michael Carrick, Gareth Barry in the old days, that type of player. The one that on Championship manner would just be described as a MC. They would, that's what we need. And the closest we've got to that is Kieran Lee.
Yeah,
but
we've got.
I don't think. But we don't supplement him enough. I mean, do you remember back in the days of Chris Brunt, where we had this incredible player? I mean, he's absolutely, as far as we were concerned, at that level, world-class player. And there was a few times where he'd try a little step over, he'd try a trick, or even he'd try a bread-and-butter ball to play through everybody. And there were times when the players around him went, I didn't know we were going to do that. And it would kind of confuse our own team. And sometimes I think Kieran Lee can do that. There's a few times where he plays a sideways one or a backwards one, because I don't think the players around him realise how good he actually is, and they don't move for him as much. And I know that's a hell of a statement to make, don't get me wrong. And I did have some examples to back it up, but there were a few in that Huddersfield game where he'd have the ball at his feet and he could have easily played a lovely 10-yard straight line pass to this guy, but didn't. He'd check out and move backwards. And I think that's a lack of confidence in the players around him. And I think Kieran Lee, for me, is a player that we should build the team around. And if we stuck an Aaron Moy next to him as well, where one could change to be the enforcer and the other one could be the ball player, and they would switch that role between themselves, as opposed to just having Barry Bannon in the Hollywood ball or Sammy Hutchinson kicking a man. You know what I mean? There doesn't seem to be enough versatility in those two players' games for me.
I mean, fair points in some regards. I think Kieran Lee is one of the best central midfielders in the league. I think he is up there or thereabouts as the best player that we've got. And maybe we all suffer a little bit from the fact that we maybe didn't account for just how bad the injury problems we had last season were, because Kieran Lee is without doubt our best midfielder. You lose him, it's noticeable that the teams that went up didn't have problems with their key players being out injured for large parts of the season. Aaron Moy wasn't missing for large parts of the season for Huddersfield, was he? And you're right in terms of you talk about building your team around Kieran Lee, but Kieran Lee's got to be there for you to be able to do that, and he was missing for the majority of the season. And I'm going to include Gary Hooper in this bracket as well, because I think that the way that we play when Gary Hooper's on the pitch is considerably better than when he's not. So I think talk about, we've talked so many times about the spine of the team, and I think Hutch is part of that. I think that Kieran Lee is part of that. I don't think that Bannon is. I think that Bannon's dispensable, and I think that he was probably at his limit last season in terms of what he can do now and where he can go. I think if he's playing alongside Kieran Lee week in, week out, he probably does perform better. But I think that we've got to be aiming higher than that. I think we might already have the answer, by the way. I'll come on to that in a bit. And Hooper, and ultimately Jordan Rhodes has got to be part of that spine, because he is a goal scorer. He scored a lot of goals in this league. I don't think there's anyone that scored more goals in the Championship than Jordan Rhodes has. And we've got to make use of that. We've got to find a way of making that work.
Yeah.
And that's got to be what they're working on now. They've got to be locked in rooms. I noted earlier today that they've got rid of quite a few backroom staff. I think it's 4 or 5 backroom staff have been released, let go, fired, whatever you want to call it. It sounds like it's mostly like physios and fitness staff and stuff like that. So they obviously feel there's a new approach needed from that point of view, which you would hope is going to be about, we've got to keep the players that we've got fit, because you can't afford to replace Gary Hooper. You can't afford to replace Kieran Lee. Whoever you bring in reserve is not going to be as good, because there is only Newcastle that can afford to have quality players sat not even in the 18, that can be sat doing nothing, twiddling the thumbs, that you just bring them in when you need them. We aren't at that level. We can't have that.
No, you're right.
I
agree with you.
I think that Alman Abdi could well be that answer. I don't think we've really seen him play at all. I think the games that he played last season, he was obviously... I mean, we have this kind of love-in thing, don't we, with Watford, because the amount of players that they've sold us. I think they saw us coming when they sold Alman Abdi. He'd played the majority of games for them in the Premier League the year before, and they've obviously thought, right, we've got this injury problem with him that we need to sort out, or do we just sell him? Let's just get £3 million and sell him, and we'll buy someone else. And we bought him, and he must have been carrying a knot when we bought him, because he never got out of first gear, did he? Now, if we can get him to the player that we know he can be, and we can make him part of that spine as well, then him and Kieran Lee, both very good footballers, intelligent footballers, good brains, and that could well solve that problem. I'm not making excuses, but injuries just tore us apart last season. They really did. And I'm not sure there were that many teams in the Championship that would have been able to deal with the injury issues that we had on that scale. I just don't think there is. Other teams that had those kind of injuries didn't finish in the top 6.
No, you're right. You're right. There was nobody with their big star players out at the key times that we had. I mean, the Hooper loss. You and I were there for that one, weren't we? We saw him grimace as he was getting carried off at Fulham behind the back. It was that one behind the back of the goal. It was, and it looked unpleasant, and I think we missed him, because I love the movement of Gary Hooper, and there's a lot of fans on Twitter that are that echo that, and there's a point now of, I think Hooper is being assembled as this messiah that once he's back, we're all going to be all right and everybody's going to be fine. But yes, I agree that maybe Alman Abdi could be that player. He could be. We've seen flashes of brilliance for him, but he's not got into first gear yet. And hopefully, a summer out and being under the physio he might be able to play alongside Kieran Lee, and we can have one of those hard hitting as well as classy midfields, which we all want. You know what I mean? Because I think games are won and lost in midfield. And, we've spoken before about about Jose Semedo. I think he's a waste of a shirt and a wage budget, but I like the way he bleeds for the club. But I've got to bring this back to the Huddersfield playoff. I've got a tweet here from Jeff SWFC on Twitter, and I asked for some feedback for tonight's show and about what we were talking about. And Jeff says, "I'm still angry. I'm angry because this was the best chance we'll ever have. Huddersfield away. Huddersfield going into it, bang out of form. They were there for the taking and we gave them too much respect. We sat back and let them play. Letting them play allows them to build on something, gain confidence and remember what they were good at all season. We should have steamed into them. We played with fear in the playoffs and Brazil... We played with fear in the playoffs. Brazil played like if you score 2, we'll score 3. We played like God. I hope you don't score 1, but if you do, we'll try and score 2. Which to an extent, I do agree with. I think we should have gone in with a bit more bite into the first leg, because I think they were there for the taking. We did give them a little bit too much respect, and I think
that's just dead easy to say in hindsight, isn't it?
It is too easy to say in hindsight, and I do want to say I've been saying it all season, you know what I mean? And it is very easy to, you know what I mean? It is very easy to go afterwards. No, we should have done this and we should have done that. But I think we started slow. Christ, in the first half we had no shots on target. Sorry, the whole game we had no shots on target. Not one shot on target. I mean, that's embarrassing given the people we've got up front. I mean, I can't. How can a team with Forestieri, Rhodes, Winnall, even Bannon, not get a shot on target? Wallace, you know what I mean? What did Carlos tell him in that game to do? If you go past the halfway line, you're getting fined, because that's the way it seemed to me.
Yeah, it was probably too far that way. I mean, there was a game plan. That game plan was to contain and not to concede. And at the time, I would have argued till I was blue in the face that it was the right game plan to play. That we had to go out and make sure that we didn't, because if Huddersfield scored 1, then that could have been the end. That could have completely killed the game for us. So
I think it would have given us a kick up the arse.
Well, possibly, but again, this is one of these things, isn't it? That it didn't happen, so we don't know. I mean, ultimately,
no.
We the only time that anything really happened, I mean, it was a fairly dire playoff tie altogether.
Yeah, it was crap.
It was.
But they always
I didn't enjoy the home leg at all. But when we scored, at that point, that's when we, with the tactics that we played over the tie, we should have shut that game down. And the fact that we let Huddersfield back into it, that's the thing that I'm really disappointed about. There's no point when that happens then going back to the first leg saying we should have done this, we should have done that. When you go 1-0 up, you should be able to defend that lead. And that for me is the disappointing bit. The fact that we did all the hard stuff, we kept the clean sheet at Huddersfield, we bided our time in the in the second leg, we took the chance when it came. I've got to be honest, I've not watched any of the highlights back of it, still even now. I've not seen the goal, and I've got no interest in seeing it. I've been told by a few people that it was a good goal, that it was a good finish from Fletcher, and that he did well. My dad was telling me on Thursday, it was a good finish. That I was like, I don't know, I've got no idea, and I don't want to see it. I don't want to see any of the replays of anything that happened in that game. I just want to put it to bed. But the mistake that we made was letting Huddersfield back into the game. And if we went on and scored another 2 or 3 in that home leg, then you wouldn't be talking about, well, we got this wrong in the away leg then, because we've done it. Let's say that Forestieri scores the penalty, and in sudden death we win the penalty shootout. That's the problem that I've got with the argument when people go back to stuff and go over it again and again. If at the time we kind of accept, and I know that you didn't, but if at the time you accept that, all right, it's a decent result to go there, keep a clean sheet, bring them back to Hillsborough, starting from scratch, it just becomes a normal game of football, and we all acknowledge that actually that was on paper that was a good result. I just think it's harsh and actually a bit foolish then to go back to revisit that at the end of the game.
I get that. I understand that, but not one shot on target.
10 points off, finished in the top 2. So we can go back to 5 or 6 games through the season. We could go back to the Burton game at the start of the season and say, well, if we'd not conceded that goal there, and then we'd have scored one and won that game, and then we'd not conceded that late goal at Birmingham. But it's pointless, isn't it? It's pointless dragging up stuff that's been and gone. You can only control what happens here and now.
I agree with your theory. Don't get me wrong. We all sat here. I mean, we sat in this podcast and we said that, I think everybody was saying that's a good result. We got a clean sheet. And I think I said it's an okay result. Because personally, I think that Huddersfield were there for the taking. But then to go there with the form that they were in and not get one shot on target, for me, it's embarrassing. But yes, you're right. I think the bit where we truly lost it was letting Huddersfield back into the tie at Hillsborough. I think there was a huge element of complacency from the fans and from the players. And as soon as we broke that deadlock, when Fletcher broke that deadlock, we thought that we were going to absolutely trounce it. This is us. We're going to be mint now. Get your phone light on. Let's start singing. We're laughing. And what we did a full Stuart Gray. We went 1-0 up and went, yeah, that's us. That's us, yeah. We're not going to try anymore. We'll take a sit back. We'll turn the pressure off. And we didn't kill it dead. It's like that scene where the Viper versus the Mountain in Game of Thrones. You know what I mean? He should have finished him off, and he didn't. You killed my daughter and my son. You know what I mean? He should have just killed him off. But instead, we got our head squoze.
Okay, well, it happened, didn't it? It was silly that we conceded the goal. It was silly that we scored it for them. It was an own goal. I've not watched it back. I don't know how clear an own goal it was or wasn't, but it happened. Let's talk, and we've touched on this slightly when we talked about Alman Abdi. Let's talk about recruitment. A few people have mentioned this. John Wigston mentioned this on Twitter, asking our thoughts on recruitment. Blair Hardman said that he was really disappointed in our recruitment. Now, we signed a fair old number of players altogether last season. I'm not sure it's necessary for us to kind of talk about them all, but maybe if we both pick someone that we were impressed with and then someone that we were disappointed in, is probably a way to do it. And I'll kick this off, and I'll probably get berated for this because I've seen this guy get so much stick. But the person I'm going to pick out and say that someone that at times impressed me was Adam Reach. I think that Adam Reach showed me enough to make me think that when we've got him playing correctly in the system that we're going to play in, bearing in mind, we signed him partway through the season. It was the back end of August, wasn't it? It was deadline day actually in August that we signed him. And in the Championship now, you're already a month into the season by the end of August. Yeah. I at times saw him do stuff that I thought, this guy will come good for us. I know he got a fair old bit of stick from a lot of people, and I've seen a heck of a lot of people actually saying that they think he was the biggest flop of the season, and they're probably going to be laughing at me now for the fact that I've picked him out as someone that impressed me, and I will point out that is, at times he's impressed me, and I think that I will say this, and again I'll probably get some stick for it. I think that he's a better player when Forestieri isn't on the pitch, because it allows him to do what he does, which is very different to what Forestieri does. And they're kind of both fighting in that same kind of corner of the pitch, aren't they? So I think that we've got something in Reach that could come really good. And at times last season, I was quite excited about thinking, moving forward, the future with him could be really good.
I agree with you.
No way.
I know that's terrible radio, and I'm really sorry, and I really should come up with some counterpoint. But I actually agree with you. I think Reach, when played right, when Forestieri is not on the pitch, stealing the limelight as he invariably would, not in a negative way. He's an exciting player to watch. But I think Reach actually can get your bum off the seat. He can make some marauding runs, and I think you and I went to Bristol City away, and I think there was a lateral run that Reach did across the pitch for the first goal, and I thought that was really clever. And then the ball came over the top. I thought that was actually bloody exciting. And there's times when he comes out, and when we play him at fullback, I much prefer him than the fullbacks we've got as well. Like, I actually quite like Reach. That, and he's a good looking fella. So tick all round for me
He's
on
a beautiful man. I know you were on the pod that we did the other week, so I'm going over old ground here, but I feel that it's relevant.
Yeah.
And we just touched on the idea of exploring us playing a 3 at the back system, playing 3 centre halves, and playing with wing backs. And I think that Reach would be fantastic in that kind of role. So he can do both. He's actually a pretty good defender. He's fit. He's in good shape. He can get up and down the wing, and it will allow him to also attack, but without having to be an out-and-out winger, which I'm not actually sure suits him that well. I think he likes, getting back at times, and he likes putting the work in and doing a wing-back role rather than an out-and-out winger role. I don't think it'll happen, but I get really excited at the thought of us looking at that.
No, I agree with you, and I think I think going into recruitment and setups and things like that, I would happily chuck Hutch into the centre midfield role. I think not the centre mid, the centre back role, centre half position, because it then gives us an option for a better ball playing midfielder. I like Hutch. Don't get me wrong, I really like him, but I think that he loses his head a bit too much because he's so committed, and in some respects it's not a negative trait to have. But with Lees, Louvens, and Hutch in that 3 at the back, and then Reach as a wing back, that could be very exciting to watch. I'd be happy with that. I wouldn't, as long as it's not Liam Palmer on the other side.
No, well, I mean that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? Because we've got two right backs effectively. Liam Palmer, who is the better defender, Jack Hunt, who's the better attacker. But when you're playing a 3 at the back system, you're playing with wing backs, you need to be good at both. So are either of them really up to it? I don't know. I mean, Hunt would be the more obvious one because that's kind of what he does. He loves getting forward, whereas Liam Palmer does tend to get a nosebleed when he finds himself in the final third of the pitch, doesn't he?
He's not intelligent enough as a footballer for me.
I could see that kind of system working with Reach and Hunt. I don't know whether or not you'd be able to build a team that's going to be pushing for top 2, which has got to be the target for next season, with those as your wing backs. I think Reach, yes. Hunt, I don't know. And have we got enough money to be looking at investing in those areas? There's got to be higher priorities.
We've spent half of next season's transfer budget already, haven't we, on Jordan Road? So we've kind of got what we've got. But I think there was one, there was one point offered up. I can't remember who it's from now. I think it was Stokey again, actually, that said that a lot of our players are quite aged at the minute right now, and where are we now an aging old squad? Do we need to start recruiting again? Do we have the funds to start recruiting again? Do we have the spaces in the squad? Are
we though? I mean, yeah, Fletcher obviously is, the I wouldn't say twilight of his career because he doesn't do a lot. He can carry on the style of play that he plays. He can carry on until he's about 35, 36, and he'd be fine. But you've got Louvens, obviously, who's the top side of 30 now. You've got Semedo, who we all assume is going to go anyway.
$1 million.
Who is Westwood? That doesn't matter. I think goalkeepers are better in their 30s, and he's only like 31. I think Westwood 32 at an absolute push. So he's probably still got another 5 or 6 years in him playing at this level easily. Wallace is a worry because I think Wallace over the course of the season was still our best right-sided player.
Even with Wallace, Wallace is only 32. We speak about Ross Wallace like he's 36, 37. He's only 32. He's not a million years old. I do think we do need to recruit 2 or 3 players to fit in, let's say, this system that we're talking about now. But do we think age is an issue? Not just yet. I'd assume with that.
I'm not. It's not something that I'm particularly worried about, and I think that. You can quote loads of stats about teams that get promoted with a really low average age, but generally experience is what sets you in good stead in the Championship.
Definitely.
And having players who've been there and done that. And actually, a player that I was quite close to picking as the player that impressed me would actually have been David Jones, because I think that he's shown a real class, a real quality about him. He's been there, he's done it, he's got a steady head. And again, he was someone that we generally played out of position because we were playing him to cover Hutcher's position when he wasn't there.
Yeah.
That's not his natural role. As I learnt from his dad in great depth at QPR away, who seemed quite annoyed at the fact that he's being played out of position every week because it means he's not really been able to show us what he can do. But, again, he's a player that's pushing around that 30 age mark, so it's less likely that he's going to be played in those attacking roles, and ends up, it's the old Rooney factor, isn't it? That you end up becoming more of a deep lying midfielder because you don't have to do as much work. So who are you going to pick out then as the new recruit that impressed you?
You've got a few there. So you've got, let's say, we got Rhodes. And we scored every goal in May or April, was it, while Rhodes was on the pitch?
No, I think that applies to the whole of 2017. This calendar year, we've not scored a goal without Jordan Rhodes on the pitch.
Which genuinely shows the work rate of the guy. You know what I mean? And I thought, fair play. When Morgan Fox first signed and we saw him down at Bristol City, I thought, we've got a decent player here. He might be all right. He doesn't seem to have kept that standard up, if I'm honest. When Stephen Fletcher signed, I was very, very excited. I used to love Stephen Fletcher. When he played for Sunderland, he was one of those marauding attacking midfielders that would get in behind the defence, get the byline and whip one in, and then somebody would tot it in, and you'd be like, brilliant. We've not had that player. We've had an ageing Scotchman that kicks people and headbutts people and digs in. And I don't want that Stephen Fletcher. I want the one that was good with the ball at his feet. And even when he's been playing, for my opinion, when he's been playing quite average, the last few games he's been getting a few because he's not afraid to stick his head where everybody else is swinging a boot, and it's worked out for him quite well. I mean, how many has he scored in the last 6 or 7 games? He nearly got one a game, didn't he? And but he's not played particularly well. So in terms of stats, Fletcher has been a hell of a signing. But the one I liked the most that we didn't see enough of, for my opinion, was Winnall. I really like Winnall. And the fact that, if we go back to that second leg at Hillsborough, the fact that actually knew who got on the pitch and Sammy Winnall didn't, again, I thought was an absolute travesty. I thought this is nuts, How is New on the field in a game like this? I thought it was absolutely insane.
We're going to have to cover the subject of Newey at some point, but shall we come back to that when we've when we picked our disappointments of the new recruits?
But I like Winnall. Winnall for me is a very bustling young man, and he clearly likes winning, and he clearly likes hitting hard and getting what he wants and being where he wants to be in his life and his career, regardless of who he steps on. He's one of those players to me that if you said to him, kick your nan in the face and you'll win the league, his nan's going to be in hospital that day. You know what I mean? He's one of those people. And I quite like that in a footballer, those win-at-all-cost types, which I don't think we breed very well in this country. If you look at somebody who, like Diego Costa, or Luis Suarez, which are regarded as one of the top 5 strikers in the world right now. These are all people that would roundhouse their granddad for a biscuit. You know what I mean? They win at all costs. I mean, they are. Diego Costa is what they refer to him as on Paddy Power, king of the bastards. You know what I mean? He's just incredible. I don't know who's worse. Jon Snow. What's the other one? Ramsey Bolton and Diego Costa. I don't know who's the worst one, to be fair. I don't know who is king of the bastards. But these ones are just people that would absolutely smash your back, smash your spine just to get a goal. And I like that about Winnall. And I think we have too many people whose reputation precede him as opposed to who's in current form, which is why he's not getting on the pitch as much as what he should.
It was a bit weird, wasn't it, that after he played him at Barnsley and he scored at Barnsley, it was his former club, and a lot had been said, and he'd got a point to prove, and then he didn't feature again, did he? For a good few games, he just vanished. And we all thought that he picked up an injury, and I think in the end, some of the Radio Sheffield lads asked Carlos about it, who just, it became apparent that actually there's no injury problem there. He just didn't feel that they were the right games for him, and he wasn't getting near the team. Do you wonder if we kind of talk about the fact that Winnall's got that, he will chase everything, he'll run after everything, he's got 100% commitment.
Yeah.
Do you think with the style of play that Carlos was trying to get us playing last season, that maybe that just didn't fit? That he likes a player that's quite consistent, that knows his job and does it, rather than just chasing after things and trying to live off scraps, if you like? Maybe.
There's an element of that to it. Would Winnall leave his position to go and chase down a lost cause if he thought he'd be able to get it? Yeah, that is a trait that he has. But I think there's raw talent in that kid. And I think we could use him more in certain games, because we spoke about this before. Round pegs with round holes and that sort of thing. Instead of playing people out of position, there are games in which you need a specific type of striker, and there are games in which Jordan Rhodes would be the first name on the team sheet, and there are games where Gary Hooper and Sammy Winnall would also be the first name on the team sheet. How many times Atty New's name would be first on the team sheet, I have no idea. But there. And it's nice to have that problem, as it were. It's nice to have that.
When they're all fit, that's going to be a real dilemma, isn't it?
Yeah,
because I think all four of those have got. It's Fletcher does something different, and I think towards the back end of the season, Fletcher was our star striker. There's no doubt about that. He was scoring the goals, and again, I can't remember a lot about the Huddersfield home game, but I've been told by a couple of my friends that know a lot more about football than I do, that taking Fletcher off, who was probably our most effective player during that game, was where it went wrong.
Yeah.
So, there's probably something in that. So you think, Fletcher's going to have a role to play. Rhodes and Hooper, arguably should be the best strike force in the league, really. And yet you've got Winnall as well, who's, can stake his claim to stuff, and then whatever else happens, whoever else we bring in, George Hurst banging them in for 40 goals over the course of the season that George Hurst scored. Is he going to be banging on the first team door a little bit more next season and trying to make a play for a shirt? It's going to be almost uncomfortably good, isn't it? How on earth are you going to fit all these players in?
Well, I think this is where the expectation came from, and I think this is where dropping out the playoffs hurt everybody a little bit. We do stand there saying, how can a team with these players not get promoted? I don't understand how we can't beat Huddersfield, looking who we have on this team sheet, because it's a nice position to have it, but where do we all fit them? I mean, we all know about Forestieri and his temperament, especially if he gets dropped. He has got the attitude of a 5-year-old child at times. You know what I mean? So. But I can see Forestieri getting shoved out to the left a few times, and I can see Winnall getting shoved out to the right, and probably Rhodes up front, maybe with Hooper, depending on what type of game it is. But I can see that's what's going to happen. I think you might see Ross Wallace dropping out the squad for Sam Winnall more, or maybe that's just wishful thinking.
Can I just pick it up on something you said in there, and I'm going to say something I've said to a couple of friends, and I didn't know whether or not to say it on the podcast because I think I'll get some stick for it. Does Forestieri have a part to play in terms of starting next season? I wonder. I
think we've all thought it.
When we signed Forestieri from Watford, and he'd been generally starting off the bench for Watford for 2 or 3 seasons, and we all saw what he could do, and we're all like, why the heck were Watford not playing him? Now I get it. I understand now. He had a great first season.
Yeah.
Last season wasn't as good. And there were times last season where he just went missing. And I can now see why, when you're building a squad that's going for promotion, you can't afford to have those players that go missing for a game. You can't have it. You've got to have 11 players who are on the ball week in, week out. Consistency is the key if you're going to get promoted. And Forestieri is a flair player. He's a very good flair player, and he can win you games, and he will win you points across the course of the season. But he'll also lose you points as well, because if there's a game where he's just not into it, it's just not happening, then I thought that towards the back end of the season, when we had him on the bench, and you think, that's great, it's a really good option off the bench. If things are going well, then you don't miss him. But if it's a game that's not going your way, you've got a really good option there to bring off the bench. And 12 months
Yes.
ago, if we'd have done this, we'd all have talked about what's the spine of our team for the season ahead. Forestieri would have been one of the first names on that list in terms of the fact we've got to build the rest of the team around him. Now I feel the opposite. Now I feel like he should be he's kind of JJ Mark II, JJ 2.0. You know, he's actually more effective for us off the bench, and he is too temperamental. He's too up and down. He's too hot and cold for us to actually consider him to be one of the first names on the team sheet next season.
I think we've probably all thought it, especially in this last 2 or 3 months. I think every Sheffield Wednesday fan at one point has thought, is Forestieri too explosive personality-wise? Is he too temperamental? Is he too volatile? Is his form a bit sketchy? And if that's a fair thing to say, and we've all thought it, we all have. But when Forestieri's on his game, he's incredible. He's a pleasure to watch. The way he holds the ball up against defenders 2 foot bigger than him, the way he bends over the ball and he can turn them on a sixpence is a pleasure to watch. But like you say, he goes missing. And those performances, those where he is turning those defenders, are starting to dwindle. That number is starting to get smaller. And like you say, I can now see why Watford let him go. I can now see why he's been allowed to move on. And we thought we'd absolutely got a right steal here. We thought, how has this happened? What's gone off here? We've managed to get a right player. And 2 years in, we've now going, yeah, I get that now, yeah. I understand that. You know, and so, you know, if he went and not to, you know, if he went back to Italy, I'd go, cheers, Fernando, you know, thanks a lot. If he went to another championship team, I'd be a bit mardy about it. You know what I mean?
I'd be a bit angry. We've been asked, we got asked quite a few questions about Forestieri. So Paul Newby asked whether or not we ever really recovered from, you know, Forestieri Gate at the start of the season where he went on strike. Daniel _SWFC asked what his best position is, and I think we've kind of covered that by saying probably on the bench is his best position. But Laura Jones asked whether or not, and I think this is a really good talking point, should we sell Fernando Forestieri? Because we have invested a lot in Jordan Rhodes, and we don't know the finer details of that deal, but assuming it's like a 5-year contract, it's 10 million quid, it's 2 million per season that's gone out the transfer budget at the start of the season. You know, financial fair play does start to move into the equation this season. We have to be careful. We cannot go out and just blow loads of money. We can do, but then we've got to get promoted because we're taking the gamble that Brighton took and it paid off for them, and other clubs have took. Middlesbrough did it and it paid off for them. I don't see DC being that kind of chairman. I don't think that's the kind of route that he wants to go down. So it would actually be very beneficial for us, knowing that we need to strengthen in a few areas, if we were to bring some money in as well. And clearly the easiest way of doing that is by, you know, selling an asset. If there's someone that we think actually we can cope without them, we can, you know, rebuild this squad in a different way, losing so and so. For me, Forestieri is the only person that I would probably put in that list and think we could actually afford to sell him and still be able to build the team that we need to build to make a real crack of it next season. And I sort of hate myself a little bit for saying it, because he is the only player that we've got that could actually win a game for you in an instant. We haven't got anyone else like that. He is the flair player. And every team wants one of those players, don't we? You know, you go back to Chris Waddle and Di Canio, Carboni. You know, we've had these players who can just in a second, when they decide, right, we're going to win this one, and they can win you the game. But all those players, with the exception of Waddle, but you know, all those players generally ends badly, doesn't it? It goes wrong because, you know, with flair comes temperament and comes difficult to manage and comes disruptive in the changing rooms. I'm not suggesting that Fernando is necessarily any of those things, but our record with flair players is generally not brilliant. So do you know what? Yeah, I'd sell him. I'd sell Forestieri this season. I think that we can build a better squad.
Did that just hit you that second? Did you just convince yourself then to go?
No, I think I know that's how I feel. But I think I've not wanted to say those words to myself because I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? You know, he is arguably in a lot of ways he's the best player that we've got. And he's been brilliant for us. He's been our top scorer for the last 2 seasons. You know, he's been fantastic. And you know, as I sit here saying it, I think, you absolute idiot. What are you talking about? But I think it would give us an opportunity to, you know, we've had to go twice at getting promoted with Forestieri as our star man, and we've not gone up either times. We've got to do something different.
Yeah.
And like I say, I think that we'd be starting him, or I think that we should be starting him off the bench anyway. So I think that we've talked a bit about the promise that we've seen in Adam Reach, letting Adam Reach have that wing, letting that become his wing, and you know, building the team around the fact that, you know, Reach is playing in that left wing position week in, week out. We know that in kind of the centre attack position, we've got loads of options that we've already talked about. Do we need a Forestieri there as another option to play behind a front two? Actually, Gary Hooper plays very well behind a front two. I imagine that Sam Winall does. Even Jordan Rhodes can play behind a front two. Do we need Forestieri?
I think he's the only asset that we've got that's worth money. If we tried to sell Nuhu, if we tried to sell Semedo, it wouldn't really make a dent in the wage budget and we wouldn't really get much for him. However, Forestieri is our most expensive and, dare I say, expendable asset. I think we can still do as well, if not better, without him and still save some money on the financial fair play. And I think you're right. I think, you know, it's horrible to say, but you know, other teams aren't sat there worrying about Adam Reach. They're going, oh, what we're going to do with Forestieri, because he's a bit of a live wire. And sometimes you can end up in the top of the league just being off the radar with average players, a la Middlesbrough last year. And I don't disagree with you, but on the other hand, what are you on about? It's Fernando Forestieri. You know what I mean?
I know. I feel like I've got that going on in my own head at the moment. You know,
I've not convinced myself.
I'm fighting myself. I'm arguing myself about this. I don't know. It's going to be interesting, isn't it? It's going to be interesting to see what happens as to, you know, if there is a chance that he moves on, and if he doesn't, if he's still a Wednesday player, where does Carlos see him fitting in? Because he certainly didn't rush him back into the team, did he? He only really came in for the playoff games because Hooper went out. I don't think he'd have started either of those games if Hooper had been in the team.
Okay. So, recruitment. We've been talking about recruitment. What about outgoings? And what about poor signings that we've had this year? Where do you want to start? Where do you want to go with that?
All right. Well,
I love the way we're making our format up. This is nice. This is.
I know. Yeah. You know, I forgot we did start off doing this kind of like neat and tidy. One player that's impressed us. One player that we've been disappointed in. The player that I'm going to pick out as who disappointed me the most last season was Callum McManaman. And I don't think we saw very much of him generally, and that for me is part of it, because, you know, we didn't see a lot of Alman Abdi, but we know that he was injured. I'm not aware that Callum McManaman had any great injury issues. I think there were a couple of times he was carrying a knock, but, you know, Carlos didn't see fit to really include him as part of the team in the second half of the season. And I thought when we signed him, I thought, this is, you know, that bit of quality. This guy's got Premier League experience. He's you know, ripped the Championship to bits in previous seasons. This could be the guy that can deputise for Forestieri. You know, when we need someone to come on and do something incredible and just win a game in an instant, this could be the guy. And not only did it not happen, but Carlos obviously didn't see enough from him on the training pitch to even think that it was particularly worth considering part of the plans in the last few games of the season. He was just gone. He was out of the squad completely and didn't even get a look in. And I trust Carlos on this. I think that, you know, Carlos sees them in training. If he thinks this guy is not going to add anything to the squad, I've got better options to put on the bench than, you know, Callum McManaman, who was however many millions of pound player a few seasons ago. And that for me is really disappointing. And I think that you know, a lot's been questioned in terms of the issues that there are around the player, the attitude of the player, and various other things. And so, you know, if what we're doing is picking out someone that I was the most disappointed in last season, it would have to be him.
I think Manaman was a very average signing for me. I think he, you know, he just He was one of the standout players when Wigan got promoted to the Premier League, and has kind of made a career on that. And I wasn't really expecting much from him, if I'm honest. I think he was only okay. One player that did let me down, because I kind of wanted this to be the move that got his career going a little bit. The one that gave him a kickstart was Will Buckley. I like Will Buckley as a player, and when he got his big move from Brighton to Sunderland, I thought, this is the guy. This is going to happen for him. And then he fell down a pecking order, and he went out on loan to dirty Leeds, and then he went to Birmingham, and then he came to us, and he's only had a handful of appearances in about 3 years, 2 or 3 years now from these clubs. And I really wanted Will Buckley to kick on. I really wanted him to be the player that I built up in my head. And I know it seems like an average thing, but I just thought, he should be all right here, Will Buckley. He should be a decent player. And he never really got in. He never really got a crack at the whip. I mean, obviously, you and I could sit here and talk about Herbie Emanuel or something, but I don't think that counts, does it?
Hey, he looked all right when he came on against Fulham. He's obviously got something.
I'd love to know that. I'd love to know something behind that transfer. I'd love to know what the workings were behind it.
Well, I assume that we signed him because we had this obsession with we've got to have 2 players for every position. And we at that point we didn't really have cover at left back, did we? We then ended up with Reach, who can cover that position. We went out and bought Fox. We ended up with actually more cover than we could possibly need at left back. I mean, he's not really going to be missed, is he, Herbie? I think didn't really work out. I think a fair point actually about Will Buckley there, because he was someone that I can't pretend that I was excited when we signed him, but I thought, that's a pretty good loan signing. That's someone that could have a real part to play.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing him play down at I think it was Cambridge. In the League Cup quite early on in the season in August, and even then just thinking, God, has this guy actually played in the Premier League? Because he's rubbish. He really didn't offer very much at all, and I think that was probably the only. I can't recall really seeing him at all for the rest of the season. I think he's made a few appearances off the bench, but he just didn't have any impact at all, did he? And you worry where does his career take him now? Because he's not Championship standard anymore, but he's under contract to a Championship team. Does Sunderland end up having to make a real go of it with him in the Championship next season?
I think he'll end up signing for somebody like Blackburn for me, because I think he needs to drop down to take another roll at the dice. All right then. So on your bike, who apart from Vincent Sasso, because you've been very vocal on Vincent Sasso all season, especially in recent weeks since the Leeds game. Apart from Vincent Sasso, who would you literally give a lift to play for the Snort Beast down the road?
So we're not talking about players that are out of contract then, we're talking about players that we actually want to sell.
But not so much that. So now the season's over, either somebody who you're glad to see the back of, or somebody that you would sell if they're not out of contract.
I'm obviously, we've touched on this. I'm not disappointed to see McManaman and Buckley go back to their parent clubs. So the players that are out of contract, Sasso, thank you, but goodbye. Herbie Emanuelson, again, see you later. I've forgot the name of Sugu. He's out of contract, isn't he?
Yeah, he's gone.
Obviously, he's going to go. The question mark, I suppose, is about Semedo, isn't it, and whether or not there's a role that he could play. I said when we talked about this on the pod a couple of weeks back that I'll just trust Carlos and DC on this. If they sit down and talk about it and feel there is still a role for him to play and the wages are correct, that it doesn't make a dent elsewhere in the squad, and they think that it's the right thing to do because he clearly does play a big behind the scenes role, then I'll trust them on that. And it stays the same. As far as we know at the moment, he's out of contract and he's not been offered a new contract. But there seems to be some questioning as to whether or not there is going to be a contract on the table at some point, and we're just a little bit behind everyone else because of the fact that we're in the playoffs. So I don't know. Beyond that,
Okay,
the players that we need to get rid of, the players that we need to ship out.
There.
Go on.
If I just break in here, what's interesting about those players that you've just listed, and I don't disagree with any of them, how many of those did we sign at the start of this season? You know what I mean? We've got the parent club ones, we've got the loan ones. Our recruitment on the whole has been pretty poor. So if we go to, let's move on to Fox, for example. Yeah. What about Morgan Fox?
I've not seen enough of Fox to be able to really pass judgment on him. I actually think that he seemed like a pretty solid all round fullback. Again, he probably falls into that category of if your aim is to be in the top 2 of the championship, is he of that level? I don't know, but I think that we saw Poodle come back playing a lot better after Fox had his run in the team, and whether that's what you need someone like Fox there for is so that it gives Poodle that boot up the arse when he needs it, then so be it.
Yeah. So, all right. Sorry. Where were you moving on to then? Where were you going with the?
This is the bit that I like. So the players that are under contract that we just want to sell, that we want to get rid of. Lewis McGugan, right? I said this the other week. I don't care if we get any money for him. Just get rid of him. Give him away. I'll throw Bolton a tenner to take him off our hands if that's what it takes. Get him off the wage bill because it's pointless. The same goes with Mello as well. I can't believe he's still got a year to go on his contract. Like, we need him off the books. He's got to go at whatever cost. Let's not even bother trying to get a transfer fee for him. Just let him go. Move him on. I mean, this probably now brings us quite naturally to the thing that we've got to talk about, which is actually New Year, isn't it?
Okay.
So
I'm going to give you a scenario.
All right.
I'm feeling saucy. I'm going to give you a scenario on this one. We've just discussed selling Forestieri. Would you keep Atinuhu if we sold Forestieri first?
Well, no. I mean, you can't. They're not falling in the same category, do they? The only reason that you keep Nuhiu is because he is that alternative option when Fletcher's not around. And do you know what? I mean, Carlos seems to rate him. Carlos used him a lot more in the back end of the season than I thought he would do. And to be fair to Atinuhu, when he comes on, he can do a job. He can do a job all right. Maybe it's a bit like, you've got that really cute dog that it's only got 3 legs now, but it's a happy little thing. It runs around. But sometimes the nice thing to do is to take it to the vet and to have it put down. It's the right thing to do. Maybe the right thing to do is to let Atinuhu go to a club where he's actually going to be able to play some games as a striker and do what he wants to do, because it's not going to happen to him here. He is going to be he is going to be at very best on the bench, coming on for 10 minutes when we're 1-0 up, because he's quite good at holding the ball up. If there is a better player in the Championship that you want when you're 1-0 up, who's taking the ball in the corner and you don't want the opposition to get it from them, I've not seen him, because he's brilliant at that. He's superb at that. But is that enough to justify paying someone a wage week in, week out for those odd occasions where he's on the bench and you want to bring him on to take the ball into the corner and just basically kick the shit out of anyone that comes near him? Like, you're not getting this ball off me, not a chance.
So in terms of Dave, then, is he just a waste of payroll?
Well, I started the thing on Twitter, which was the hashtag #NewHello or hashtag @Dios, which took me about an hour to come up with, to be fair.
Lovely.
The majority of people, so there were Will and Danny who said that he should stay. We got John, Jill, Steve, James, Hayden, Mike, John, all saying that he should go. I wonder whether part of this, is psychological. Is now the time for us to say, right, he's one of the few ties to the Stuart Gray era, even the Dave Jones era. He's done all right for us. It's never really happened, has it? He's never been superb in a Wednesday shirt. He at times.
I tell you what,
it's
a good job Vic and Lord
decent,
Hillsborough aren't here, isn't it?
yeah, I know he'll be furious when he listens to this.
He'll be spitting his brandy out with Lord Hillsborough at this.
Yeah.
He won't be having it. We can. I tell you what, next week tune in. It'll be just Vic and Lord Hillsborough talking about Dave Natty knew who.
Yeah,
and you can listen to that one.
The Atty podcast. I'd get rid. I think we could get some money for him. Yeah, if it was only like $500,000 or something like that. It's something.
There is a country out there that plays the type of football that he plays that will do very well. Like what springs to mind is Scandinavian football. They love those big talismanic strikers. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? They think they're great. There's one at Malmo now called Rosenberg. Or there was that Milik last year at Ajax, for example. Even in the Netherlands, they love their big lad strikers.
Yeah.
And I think that he'd fit in well in that sort of football. We play a lot faster paced game, and he's just not for me. He's not for me. So I'm just trying to think what else I've got to go. I've got Gary Morton on Twitter says that he agreed with me all season because he thinks I'm mate. I think he thinks I'm
rubbish.
In it, he says that we've got the best squad in the league. Best squad in the league. It just doesn't make the best use of it, according to Cavalier, which I think, according to Gary about Cavalier, I think it takes us lovely into Cavalier staying or going. Now we know he's staying. That's happened, and I think, and again, rare occasion here, James. I agreed with everything you said on the last podcast about the type of chairman that Chansiri is, about stability, and about going forward. And I think it's good for the club that we've stayed with him. Do I think he's made some howling errors, especially towards the back end of the season? Yeah, I do. Yeah. But
I agree with you on that. Yeah.
But I think that we've made the right decision in keeping Carlos at the minimum till Christmas.
Do you know what, Fudge? We've done an absolutely terrible job of this thing tonight because this was supposed to be us arguing for an hour, and yet all we've actually done is agreed. We even forced poor Rich into making that boxing style poster for us about James versus Fudge, the showdown, and yet we've generally agreed on everything. What's going wrong? We've not drunk enough, have we? That's the problem.
Yeah, that's
maybe we need a few more beers in our system for this to work.
So Paul Newby, he said all that build up for disappointment at the end sounds like a promotion bid. You can't get the staff these days. So yeah, he also saying that I think we feel as fans we feel really bitter about it, and I wanted to ask you this question. This was the question I kind of wanted to finish on. Is it worse going out at Wembley in the final or limping out as we did? Which was worse?
Right, okay. For me, without any doubt whatsoever, I was a lot worse after Wembley. A lot worse after Wembley because you're so close. You can actually reach out and touch the Premier League when you're at Wembley, and particularly the way that day went, where it was, what was it, like 30 minutes to go and they scored, and you're like, this is annoying. Like, you can see the finishing line in sight, and yet we drifted away from it. The Huddersfield game, I had the day off afterwards, and I sulked for a day, and I really did sulk for a day. And I had to cancel my hotel reservation down in London for the final, and that hit me pretty hard. And then after that, I just thought, you know what? It doesn't. At least I've not had to spend a fortune going to London, staying there for 2 days. I drink ridiculously expensive beer, so I've saved myself about £6 a pint, and it just felt like less of an inconvenience to go out in the semi-finals. Yeah, the thing was, I think for me it's weird because I said this the other week, and I've not said it through the course of the rest of the season. I said to my friends several times through the season, I said, I think we'll make the playoffs. I think we'll lose in the semi-final. When they scored at Hillsborough, I just knew. For me, I almost made my peace with it there and then because I just knew. It wasn't our time. It wasn't our season. It had not been our season all season long, had it? At no point did we ever think, we are storming this. We're in our flow and we're storming it. We had a couple of good runs, and that was it really. It wasn't our time, it wasn't our season. So actually, quite quickly for me, I was able to make peace with it and move on. And I think there are other people that have found it a lot more difficult, and there'll be some people that would say that losing in the semis, it's the age-old football saying, isn't it, that at least if you lose in the final, you've had your day out and all that kind of stuff. Losing in the semi-final is worse. But we had that the year before, and if it's not going to be our season, I would rather us just, if we're going to lose, let's just lose. And then let's move. Let's concentrate on next season. Let's concentrate on building things for next season.
One of the things that was brought up was the and it was Sharpie on Twitter. He asked me a pertinent question. Actually, he said, "What disappoints him most is not whether we got the semi-final or whether we got the final or whatever. Was that one of the best chances we're going to get in the Premier League, given what's coming down and given what's gone up?"
There's never going to be an easy season to get out of this league, and we are talking about, there are probably more than half a dozen teams in the Championship next season who have parachute payments of some sort. I mean, I believe Wigan are still getting parachute payments at the moment.
Yeah, they're still getting monies.
It's astonishing. So there are teams that we are just not on an even footing with. And the situation was the same last season, and it was the same the season before. And we competed, and we were able to get where we finished. So yeah, I can see that point. I can see that argument, but it's a little bit like saying, well, maybe we shouldn't have got relegated from the Premier League in 2000 because then we wouldn't have to worry about going back up. It's like we didn't go up, and that's it. And of course, it's a missed opportunity. Every time you get to the playoffs and you don't go up is a missed opportunity. The season before was a bigger missed opportunity because we were at the final. We were one goal away from being in the Premier League. I think the nature of the season as it unfolded and the fact that it didn't have that excitement, it didn't have that buzz about it that the season before had. Yeah. We're kind of looking for, something to blame or we want to hit out about it. There weren't many people saying, "Oh, it's such a missed opportunity." There weren't many people getting angry after we lost to Hull in the playoff final, because we'd overachieved.
No.
And this time around, people won. It's the same reason that people are berating Jordan Rhodes for saying that he didn't feel confident taking a penalty, which is the most ridiculous argument I've ever heard from football fans ever. The fact that a player says, "I don't feel very confident," and the manager says, "All right, well, we've got 5 of the players that want to take them, so they'll go and take them." And people say Jordan Rhodes has cost us a place in the Premier League. Nonsense. No. I've never heard so much utter rubbish from football fans. Anyway, off on a tangent there. Basically, I think it's just a natural thing for us to just think, is that it? Is that our chance gone? No, we'll have a great season next season. We'll have a damn good go at the top 2. I said this the other week that we've got one thing that no other team that's knocking around the Championship has now, which is that we've got consistency. We've had the same manager now for 3 seasons. He's the 3rd longest serving manager in the Championship, which sounds ridiculous, but he is. There is only who was I looking at? There is Preston and obviously someone else, and I can't think who the other team is whose manager's been there for longer. But it is what it is. Carlos is now a long-serving manager. He knows these players. He knows this club, and that can give us an advantage that someone like Sunderland and Middlesbrough and Hull, they've all got plenty of money. None of them have got a manager. And so they're going to be starting from scratch this summer with someone that's going to come in and they're going to think, right, I want to change things. And actually, they've all got the money to change things. So they'll buy players and they'll start playing around with their squad. It didn't work for Aston Villa. So that it could end up with all 3 of those teams coming down, having a transitional season.
Personally speaking, I think that Villa will get their life together.
I agree.
Because I think they thought they could buy it last year and they got bit in the arse. And I think Sunderland will do an Aston Villa. I think they'll think, we're Sunderland. We'll just do what Newcastle did. And I don't think... that club's an absolute shambles from start to finish. There was even rumours about David Moyes losing games on purpose in January just so he could say to the chairman, look,
look, I need players because we're getting tonked every week. There was rumours of that. They were rife. But in terms of, is this our best opportunity? If you'd have asked me a year ago, I was absolutely terrified of the teams that were coming down and the teams that were, teams like that we beat in the playoffs last year. So there was Brighton. Who else finished in the playoffs last season? There was us, Brighton,
Hull, Derby,
and Derby County. Now, I thought, there was obviously going to be those remaining 3 teams from that. There would be the 3 teams coming down from the Premier League. I was terrified about this season. And then here come bloody Huddersfield and absolutely tore into the party. All right, lads, what's going on here? Seems like a laugh. And you think, well, hang on, we've been tussling this out for years. You can't just turn up. And then they did and got promoted. And I have ended up with, people have been going, you know what, Fudgy, you were right about the playoff. It's exactly what happened. As you said, they parked the bus and win on penalties. And I said, there's no pride in that whatsoever. However, I also said, and a lot of people seem to have forgotten this, that Huddersfield will fall away. Don't worry about Huddersfield. They're just punching above the weight. And that did not happen.
Just to point off the back of that, and I sat and worked this out, so I think this is right. The teams that were in the Championship last season, 17 of them, so 17 of the 24, have previously been in the Premier League. And any team that's previously been in the Premier League, I mean, bloody hell, Blackburn have won the Premier League. Any team that's previously been in the Premier League can arguably harbour ambitions to be going for the Premier League, can't they? They've been there before. There's no reason why they shouldn't be aiming to get there again. So there were only 7 teams in the Championship last season who've not been in the Premier League before. Of those 7 teams, 2 of them got promoted. Now that's got to give hope for anyone, really, in terms of the fact that when people say, oh, football, it's just, teams come down and they go straight back up. Well, that's been proved time and time again to not be the case. And every year the parachute payments get bigger, and so it becomes more difficult. The thing that's in our advantage this time is that both Hull and Middlesbrough will not get the full parachute payment because they only stayed at 1 season. And you get 1 year less, don't you, in terms of parachute payments now, if you don't stay up for a season in the Premier League. So that's something. But I think the fact, particularly Huddersfield, all right, and let's put aside the fact that we all feel a bit bitter about it. But Huddersfield have shown that if you get your tactics right and you get the right blend of players, then you can do it. You can do it. Anyone can do it. So us talking about have we missed our opportunity? There's absolutely no reason why we can't really go for it next season and make a damn good go of it. We need 2 or 3, maybe 3 or 4, maybe even more than that. But we need some quality additions to remove those times last season where we could see it just fall into bits a little bit, where we just couldn't deal with the problems that were in front of us. We need to sort that out this summer, and I trust that they will do that, and I think we can have a right good go at it next season. I really do.
That's actually brought us full circle, right? You said, Dan, has actually brought us right round to where we started this entire idea for this show. I believe that that there's going to be those games where we can just see it getting away from us, where we need to be a little bit more direct, a little bit more decisive down the pitch, whereas you'd probably like to see us a little bit more shored up at the back. And
well, do you know what? I mean? I'm not sure that I do. I think that you've got to have the right players. If you've got the right players, then you can afford to do. And I'll pick on Brighton as being the team that I admired the most for this, for the reasons that I said earlier on, which is that they had a certain style of play, a way that they wanted to play football. But when it wasn't going that way, and this is why in year 1 of this project we fell down. We didn't get promoted because we had a style of play, and when we came up against teams that didn't work against, it was mostly teams at the bottom.
We had nowhere to go.
Yeah, we didn't have the answer. We didn't have a plan B. Now last season, we probably also didn't have a plan B, but we changed plan A to be what plan B should have been the season before. But then we didn't have, if plan B had been what plan A had been the season before, then it might have been different. So what we need to do is to find a style of play. We need Carlos to feel he's got faith in the team to be able to go out and play it about a bit and be better than the opposition, because I don't actually think that the stands will the fans will stand for another season where it feels like we're playing at times some quite negative and quite boring stuff. I think that we stuck with it last season, and I'll hold my hand up and say I stood by it because I thought it was going to be good enough to take us to the Premier League. It wasn't. We didn't get to the Premier League, so we've got to say, right, okay, well, we tried that, and that didn't work either. So now we go for, plan C. We need a third way. We need a different style next season that incorporates a little bit of probably all those things that we've done over the last couple of seasons, with players that are good enough to pull it off. And we need, when they return for pre-season training on whatever it is, 1st of July in a few weeks, from the word go, he says, this is how we're going to play next season. It's going to work for us. We don't spend the first 6 weeks of the season fanning about trying to decide what style we're going to play. He needs to know that now. And he needs to be putting that into place now so that we hit the ground running in August. No slow start this time.
It's exactly that. I don't want to, there was too many games where it was last season, wasn't it, where it was more prevalent, where we were scoring in the last 5 minutes till we get all 3 points. It's not sustainable. We can't keep coming from behind, And I think what we've deciphered through all of this is that recruitment is key. We need the right players to fit in with this philosophy, with this Louis van Gaal style philosophy. And I agree with it, because Brighton had a philosophy, as did Newcastle. And they have a way of playing as a club. Look at the way Wenger has transformed Arsenal and the way that they play football. They have played that same style for 20 years. I mean, all right, it's now a bit dated and the fans are going crazy about it, but that's what installing a philosophy does. And you can win things and you can breed success by having a way of playing football. And it's about getting the right players for that philosophy that he wants to instill.
Yeah. Think fair comments.
So, shall we wrap this up then, James? Are we still agreeing to disagree, or are we blaming it all on recruitment?
I think we've actually found that we're probably in hindsight we've got more common ground than maybe we thought we did. And certainly we seem to agree on what we need to do for next season. I mean, football, unfortunately, is not as simple as it is when we sit here and we talk about it, is it? And I'm sure that it'll not take long into the new season for us to have a disagreement about something. But I think if we both agree that this is the direction that we need to go in, that we bring in the right players, we bring in quality, we don't throw some shit at a wall and hope that we bring in the right people. We need to identify the right players, and I hope to God that they've already done that, because if we haven't at this stage, then we are going to end up panic buying. Bring in the right players, get the system right.
Throwing shit at a wall is, it's the Dan Fudge way of punditry. You know what I mean? There's a lot to be said about, saying enough shite and some of it's going to stick. Like, come on, man. I'm a big fan of that approach.
Well, if it works for you, maybe that's where we need
to go.
All right,
listen. So I just want to thank everybody that contributed. So all those people that sent us those messages and your tweets. So Montague Dangerous, Sharpie, there was Jeff, there was Manhattan Owl, there was James. Who else did you have there, James?
Loads. So I've got John, Blair, Nick Alsteeler, Paul Newby, Daniel, Laura. Who else have I got? Will, Danny, John, Jill, Steve, James, Hayden, Mike, John, Kieran, and Monty Dangerous are all on my list of people that have contributed. And there's probably a couple that I've missed off there because I've been deleting them as I've been going through mentioning stuff. So there we go.
Well, you had a lot more feedback than I, didn't you? And obviously I forgot to mention Stokey as well, who went, every time Sheffield went to play, sends me a barrage of about 8 or 9 WhatsApp messages. Listen, Stokey, lay off the Jaeger bombs, fam, yeah? Because, I might be in bed or something, or at work.
So I'm going to say at this point that hopefully this is the last that you hear of us for a good few weeks, because I said right at the start of this that I've kind of made my peace with what happened last season, and actually I've kind of got drawn back into it tonight, and I've quite enjoyed talking about the stuff that we've talked about. But I am looking forward to now having a couple of weeks off from football, forgetting all about it, and go on holiday at the start of July. Pre-season games then start when I get back, and that will be the next point that I really want to think about football. And I think we've had 2 seasons that have been emotionally quite testing. So I would encourage us all to just take a bit of a step back. Give yourself the summer off. give yourself the summer, not worrying too much about it. Don't think too much about it. Don't go on Twitter every 5 minutes like, why have we not signed anyone? Rah, 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 rah. Just chill a bit. Let's all just enjoy this summer, and let's come back fresh-faced in August, shall we?
I've already forgotten it. I've been on a stag do in Benidorm. I don't know what day it is.
Lovely. So with that then, that's us for a fair few weeks. I would imagine that we'll be back in our old traditional format with the rest of the guys as well. Probably around the back end of July, once there's a few players through the door and a few things to talk about. But until then, I guess it's goodbye for now.
And we'll see you real soon. We had to do it.